Hey everyone, how you doing today? It is Barb with Halfway to Sane. Hope everyone is doing well today. Just wanted to go over today with some of the info about Bryan Kohberger, going over some of the facts and whatnot in case you haven't been following along with the whole case. If you have been following along and you listen to this and you hear something that you want to add to it, please go ahead. Feel free to leave the comments down below. I'd appreciate it. But other than that, I'm going to go ahead and get right into it. So, under a dark Idaho sky, investigators flew Bryan Kohberger to the college town of Moscow. Police delivered him to the Latah County Jail on January 5th in an orange jumpsuit. His face was vacant, and the 28-year-old made what will likely be his first of many appearances in court. He stands charged with the murder of 4 students from the University of Idaho. They would be Kaylee Goncalves, Maddie Mogan, Ethan Chavin, and Xana Kernodle. And investigators say he stabbed them to death in the home that they all shared. The judge in that case had stated to Kohberger the maximum penalty for this offense, if you plead guilty or be found guilty, is up to death and imprisonment for life. He asked him, "Do you understand?" To which Kohberger said yes, he did. At that time, Kohberger had not yet entered a plea. In an affidavit, investigators laid out their understanding of the grim details about the night of the killings. They say the killer left his DNA on a leather knife sheath found on a bed next to Maddie Mogan, or Mogen. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correct, so I do apologize. And most importantly, they say a surviving roommate thought she had heard crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask. The man walked right past her as she stood frozen in shock. She then locked herself in her room. Authorities have not disclosed a motive or if had a connection to the students, but are learning more about just who Bryan Kohberger is. Kohberger had been at the university since August, studying to get his PhD in criminology. He was also a teaching assistant in the Department of Criminal Justice. He lived in an apartment complex on campus and had an office there. Kohberger had applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department in the fall. He wrote in his application essay that he had an interest in assisting rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyze technological data. Student Benjamin Roberts took 4 classes with Kohberger. He seemed very comfortable around other people. That's what Benjamin was saying about Kohberger. He said Kohberger seemed very comfortable around other people. He was just very quick to offer his opinion and his thoughts. He was always participating fairly eagerly in classroom discussions, and he says Kohberger appeared highly intelligent. This was, though, a comment Kohberger made, and it was kind of a flippant guy talk thing. He said once Kohberger had said to him, "You know, I can go down to a bar or club and pretty much have any lady I wanted." So he was pretty much just stating how maybe cocky Kohberger was. Kohberger arrived at the university after earning his bachelor's degree in psychology and master's degree in criminal justice at DeSales University in Center Valley, Pennsylvania. While at DeSales, authorities say Bryan Kohberger posted this survey, approved by the university, on a website. So Kohberger put on Reddit asking ex-cons about the crimes that they committed. One question he asked: before making your move, how did you approach your target or your victim? This could be a piece of circumstantial evidence stated by retired FBI Supervisor Special Agent James Gagliano. The fact that the suspect was interested in pursuing a PhD in criminal justice and was especially interested in the mental state that people who had committed murders in the past, yes, it could be interesting to know. He says, but I know a lot of researchers that they study those things too, and that would never commit a quadruple homicide. And if Kohberger was involved in these murders, genetic genealogist C.C. Moore questions why he would be so careless as to allegedly leave his DNA at the crime scene. People are talking about how smart he supposedly is, and I just can't see that could be true because any student of forensic science or criminology would have to know that this is virtually impossible not to leave DNA behind at a very violent, intimate crime scene like this. C.C. Moore said, Ted Bundy thought he was smart, but he wasn't that smart. Benjamin Roberts said, looking back over the last months, I feel like there should have been signs that I should have seen, and I didn't. I was blindsided. And Jason Labar, the Monroe County Public Defender, said, this is out of character for Bryan Kohberger, these allegations. The family would want the general public to know that Bryan is a caring son, a brother, and that he is responsible, and that he is devoted to them. In a statement, the family said, we care deeply for the 4 families who have lost their precious children and that they seek the truth and promote his presumptions of innocence rather than judge unknown facts and make erroneous assumptions. Jason Labar said he is innocent until proven guilty otherwise. He said Kohberger came from a close-knit family and he grew up in eastern Pennsylvania in the Pocono Mountains. His father was a maintenance worker and his mom worked in the school system. Bryan had 2 older sisters, one who worked as a family therapist, and the other sister who once appeared in a 2011 low-budget slasher film 2 days back about a group of young students viciously murdered by a serial killer. She now works as a counselor. Kohberger's friend Bree says she met Bryan at a party when they attended Pleasant Valley High School. She said he was really funny. He wasn't outgoing at all, but he also wasn't shy. She said they bonded over the love of the outdoors. She says, I don't necessarily remember the conversations, but you definitely remember how someone makes you feel. I just remember feeling okay. I was just with a friend and it felt natural. She recalls Kohberger was an average student with only a few close friends. In a yearbook photo, Kohberger's caption said he aspired to be an Army Ranger. Casey Arntz, another student, said he was an overweight kid and he got bullied a lot. But she said people saw a change in Kohberger the beginning of the senior year. He lost like 100 pounds and he was a rail. It was after the weight loss that a lot of people noticed a huge switch in him. She also said, my brother said that even though they were friends, Bryan bullied him. He said Bryan would put him in a chokehold and that he would start... Here we go. He started using heroin, which ended their friendship. You just saw him becoming more destructive. He stayed really secluded, and it's unclear when exactly Kohberger went into recovery, but both Bree and Casey said years after high school, it appeared as if he was getting his life together. He was going to Northampton Community College and working security for Pleasant Valley School District. Bree said he was telling me that he wanted to get sober and that he wanted to do better. Casey said the last time she seen Bryan was in 2017 at one of her friend's weddings, and she said she gave him a big hug and said to him, you look so good. I'm so proud of you. Both Bree and Casey said it appeared that Kohberger had a new focus in criminology. He wanted to do something that impacted people in a good way. People were not his strong suit, and I think through his criminology studies, he was really trying to understand humans and try to understand himself. Now, Bree, like many who knew him, struggled to connect the person they once knew to this unspeakable crime. Bree said, I think a lot of people who were close to him are feeling this massive amount of guilt, like, why didn't I see it? Or did I miss something? And where did it go wrong? Before it was a crime scene, it was a home to 5 close friends, maybe none closer than Maddie Mogen and Kaylee Gonsalves. On TikTok, the 21-year-old seniors looked like they were enjoying their final school year. In the early morning of November 13th, 2022, the two friends headed to a food truck, but their seemingly carefree existence would come to an abrupt end just hours later. Kaylee and Maddie were stabbed to death in the upstairs part of the house. 100 miles away in northern Idaho, Kaylee's father, Steve, got the news. Steve Gonsalves said about the murder, "You just feel like you're getting crushed by 1,000 pounds of weight. He wants the world to know that they got robbed. Somebody stole from you, and he said Kaylee would have made the world a better place." A general studies major, she was the middle child of 5 siblings. He said she was always up for a challenge, and she grew up with 2 boys that were older than her. And she didn't see any reason why she couldn't be as quick and fast and good as they were. Like most young people, what she wanted to do with her life had changed. She was going to be a teacher, but once she found out how long it was going to pay back her student loans, she said, "Dad, you know, that computer work that you do seems to work out pretty well." She reportedly had a job lined up in Austin, Texas, but made it clear that one day she hoped to settle down somewhere near her dearest friend, Maddie Mogen. Maddie was a marketing major, and she and Kaylee had been inseparable since 6th grade. Steve Gonsalves said, "I just felt like it was more of a sisterhood than a friendship, and she was just one of our kids." So it did not come as a surprise when Steve revealed at a November memorial that Kaylee and Maddie died side by side. They went to high school together. They came here together. And in the end, they died together, in the same room and in the same bed. It comforts us, and it lets us know that they were with their best friend in the whole world. It was a belief of Maddie's stepfather, Scott Laramie. He repeated to another packed memorial just days later. He said the 2 of them were a force to be reckoned with. They stuck together through everything. Now, Maddie had a boyfriend whose name was Jake Schreiger, and Jake said she was the first person he spoke to every morning and the last person that he talked to before bed. He said Maddie had a talent for making people laugh. She was really funny. Her jokes really would come out of nowhere and just be like, "Is that the cute little blonde girl that just said that?" They had been together for more than a year, but Maddie and Kaylee weren't the only victims. 2 other roommates were in their rooms and unharmed during the attacks on the 2nd floor. The killer made his way to the room of Xana Kernodle, and Jasmine Kernodle said, "Xana was my baby sister, but she was so much wiser. She would always tell me she wouldn't know what to do without me, and now I have to live without her." A 20-year-old majoring in marketing, Xana, known for being focused on her studies, so focused she didn't make much time for dating. Jasmine said Xana never had a boyfriend before, and my dad and I wondered if she was ever going to get one. That was until she met Ethan Chapin. The way she would talk about him was something I've never heard her do before. Ethan was a 20-year-old majoring in recreation and tourism management. He and Xana began dating in the spring of 2022. They had something special, and everyone around them knew, especially anyone who followed the pair on Instagram. For Ethan's birthday, Xana posted photos of them with the caption, "Life is so much better with you in it, and I love you." It would be her last Instagram post. Just 2 weeks later, the young couple was found stabbed to death in Xana's bedroom. At the University of Idaho, the pain of this tragedy is felt at the root and extends hundreds of miles away to a tulip farm in Skagit Valley, Washington, where Ethan worked before heading to college. His boss, Andrew Miller, said Ethan started in the spring of 2021. It was the best tulip festival ever. He said the annual tulip festival attracts close to 500,000 visitors, and Ethan stood out in the crowd. He's a big guy wearing a big smile. That's the part that kind of stuck with me right away. Ethan was a triplet who worked there with his siblings, Maisie and Hunter, and they lived in a rented house on the farm with their parents. The triplets were incredibly close. They were best friends, and if one did something, they all did something. It was pretty cool to see, including attending the University of Idaho together. And that was the funniest thing. It was like, of course it was going to be a package deal. A friend of Ariana Makoba said she was excited because his siblings were going with him, and she said Ethan's parents had decided to live in Idaho too. She said when she heard Ethan had been murdered, she couldn't believe it. She said the first thing she did was message Ethan. "I was like, hey, you're okay, right? Like, this isn't real." and obviously he didn't respond. Reese Gardner scoured the internet for information, saying, "I just couldn't stop reading articles. I just wanted to know what happened, and I wanted to know why." But in lieu of answers, Gardner turned to tulips. He named one after Ethan. "I thought there's no better way to remember someone who had such a big role in those farms. But creating a new tulip is a very long process. So instead it was suggested a mix of tulips that would be perfect a tribute to Ethan, yellow and white. Yellow, of course, because go Vandals, University of Idaho. That's significant, and white is an eternal color. Tulips come up in the spring, and it's a symbol of hope. With his parents' blessings, they named the mix of tulips Ethan's Smile. They planted thousands of bulbs in the state of Washington and sent a couple thousand more to the University of Idaho. Andrew Miller said, "It really is our hope that we'll be able to continue to plant, that anybody wants to remember him will be able to have their own Ethan's Smile garden. It's a living legacy." Now, 40 days after the murders, authorities apprehended Bryan Kohberger. They had him in their sights early on, but kept it close to the vest. So in the early days after the November 13th murders, frustration swept over Moscow, Idaho. Special Agent James Gagliano said, "In this instance, people were expecting a pretty quick arrest in this case, and it takes time." Kaylee's father, Steve Gonsalves, said he was trying as best as he could to deal with the news no one expects. "Most things I'm prepared for. Most things as a dad you can handle. But something like that you just can't prepare for, and you can't fix it." He said he didn't think anyone in her inner circle was capable of interacting and doing something like that. Parents drove hundreds of miles to pick up their kids to head home and stay home for the semester. Moscow, Idaho is not a place where violent crime is an issue. As police started their investigation, they traced the victim's final steps. The day before the murder seemed to start off ordinarily. Kaylee Gonsalves posted photos of her with her roommates and Ethan Chapin to her Instagram account with the caption, "One lucky girl to be surrounded by these people every day." That evening, Ethan and Xana attended a party at a fraternity house on campus. And Kaylee and Madison were at a bar between 10 p.m. and 1:30 a.m. They were then seen at a local food vendor, the Grub Truck. It is believed they all returned home by 2 a.m. on November 13th. So in examining the timeline, police knew that the crime took place sometime in the early morning hours. There were also 2 other University of Idaho students who were inside the house when the murders took place. It was later that morning that a call was made to 911 from... Sorry guys, my dog started barking. Don't know if you heard them or not. So anyway, later that morning, a call was made to 911 from one of the surviving roommates' phones to report an unconscious person. Police arrived at the house at 11:30 a.m., and they found the victims on the second and third floor of the house in bedrooms. A horrific and a very large-scale crime scene, because you're going to be dealing with a number of different floors that needed to be processed. The bedrooms where the crimes actually occurred, and then ingress and egress points. How did the alleged killer get inside the house? Through a front door? Through a window? Those are all things police were looking at. I don't know if you can hear my dogs over here, but they're absolutely nuts. No weapon had been located at that time, and there was no sign of forced entry in the house. And on November 16th, 3 days after the murders, the Moscow police held their first press conference. Chief James Fry stated, "We believe this was an isolated, targeted attack on our victims. We do not have a suspect at this time, and that individual is out there." Coroner Kathy Mabbutt issued her report on November 17th. They were all murdered through stabbing with some kind of a probably large knife. She said some of the victims had defensive wounds, but none had signs of sexual abuse. Thank goodness. FBI Special Agent James Gagliano stated he just believed the Moscow Police Department just didn't have a lot of experience in working a homicide, especially one as heinous as this. About 3 weeks with no arrest, what appeared to the public to be was no real suspects, and Steve Goncalves grew more concerned that authorities weren't doing enough and that the murders would turn into a cold case. So he says he started working with his own team to investigate the murders. So we just thought, this is the time. Let's get it out there and let's not let it go cold. Steve thought the motive could have been pretty girls with a handsome guy, and maybe someone was stalking them. Meanwhile, names of the possible people of interest were trickled out, including members of the community, acquaintances of the victims, and they all seemed to be part of an unfounded rumor mill, many from online sleuths. Goncalves even had people come to him to prove they were not involved. We had certain suspects take their shirts off in our kitchen to show if they had any scratches or marks, and we tried to do everything in our powers to make sure that if we thought somebody was ruled out, we truly felt like we looked at them. Law enforcement would end up receiving thousands of tips, but the investigators, by outward appearances, seemed stalled. Nearly a month after the murders on December 7th, police were seen packing up the victims' belongings to return to their families who had lost so much. It was the police chief behind the wheel of the U-Haul truck. That same day, a plea was made to the public. Police were interested in speaking with the occupants of a white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra, unknown license plate, spotted near the crime scene around the time of the killings. Police released photos of similar makes to of the vehicle that we're looking for. James Gagliano said, pushing that out to the media, pushing that out to people on the internet, and pushing them out to the public so that anyone can see a potential suspect or a person of interest or potential vehicle. It turns out that about 2 weeks before the police asked the public to be on the lookout for the white Hyundai Elantra, they had already shared that information with surrounding law enforcement. And on November 29th, 2022, a white Elantra was located by Washington State University Police. The car was registered to Bryan Kohberger. The Hyundai Elantra was tracked for several days by the FBI using EasyPass monitoring, fixed-wing aircraft, and ground support as it was driven by Kohberger, along with his father, from the Pullman, Washington, on that cross-country trip to the family's home in Pennsylvania. On December 15th, the car was stopped twice for driving violations by the Indiana State Police and the Hancock Sheriff's Office. Both agencies said that at the time of the stops, there was no information available on a suspect for the crime in Idaho, to include identifying information or any specific information, related to the license plate, state, or number of the white Hyundai Elantra. They gave a verbal warning, and the trip continued home. And then their holiday came to an abrupt end. On December 30th, 2022, police made the announcement that Bryan Kohberger was under arrest for the murders. He was arrested at his family's home in Albrightsville at 3 a.m. in the morning. Approximately 50 law enforcement officers were on the scene. There were multiple windows that were broken and multiple doors to gain access. Authorities believe Kohberger acted alone, and Bryan was very shocked by his arrest. He didn't know why they were there, but he was aware of the case in Idaho. Bryan said he was very eager to be exonerated and that he was willing to go back to Idaho on January 3rd, 2023, at a hearing in Pennsylvania. He signed a waiver of his extradition, and on January 4th, he was flown to Idaho, where he is in jail, charged with 4 murders. Now, January 5th, 2023, Kohberger appeared in court in Moscow with his new public defender to hear the charges read against him. Steve Goncalves says, "You don't heal from this. It's never going to happen. You're never going to be healed. You're never going to get through this. And when they die, part of you dies." So that's all I have for this current story. I am, however, going to go ahead and post the timeline of Bryan Kohberger's events. If you want to go ahead and take a look at that, I felt it was too long to add on to this one. But in the meantime, I would really appreciate if you guys can go ahead and subscribe to my channels, hit that thumbs up button, and hit that notification bell so that you do know the next time that I upload a video. I would like to thank you again for staying and being part of this, and peace. Talk to you next time.